It's like this river. At first, it's a small river and it's peaceful, it's quiet, and you're going down in a canoe. But yet there's a couple of people on the shore that are like, hey, get out the river. There's a deadly waterfall ahead. And you're enjoying the view and you keep going and you get closer to the water's edge. There's signs that say, get out now, it's deadly. And then you don't realize you've gone over the waterfall's edge until you're halfway down. Here comes that impact, right?
You're listening to the Sex Addicts Recovery Podcast, a place for sex addicts to share their experiences of recovery, to help break the stigma, myths, and misconceptions of sex addiction. This podcast may contain topics of sexuality, sexual trauma, dysfunction, or other things that may be triggering, so listener discretion is advised. Hello, and welcome to the Sex Addicts Recovery Podcast. My name is Jason, I'm a sex addict, and I will be your podcast host for today. Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome to episode 168 of the Sex Addicts Recovery Podcast. As you can tell by now, I put a short teaser from this week's guest, Jay, at the beginning. I've been wanting to try editing a short segment from a conversation to open the podcast with, and as I was working on this episode, I took note of Jay's river analogy and thought it would be perfect. So our guest this week, Jay, originally emailed us back in March to be a guest, and at the time I was busy planning the retreat, and things had been quite busy since. And we finally had the chance to record this conversation back in July. During our conversation, Jay talked about not being able to make direct amends with a girlfriend who had tragically passed away. He went on to talk about making living amends, and so for the reading this week, I picked a part of Step 9 from the Green Book, which can be found on page 51. And again, Step 9 is made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. And this paragraph says, if we cannot make our amends directly, we can still take meaningful actions. We may, for instance, donate time or money to an appropriate charity or institution. It may be best to make our donations anonymously in the spirit of our newfound humility. In the case of those people who are deceased, we can still write letters to them containing everything we would have said to them if they were alive, and then read these letters to our sponsor. We can remember such people in our prayers and allow their memory to motivate us in our new way of life. In all cases where we cannot, for whatever reason, make direct amends, we grieve our losses and then use our experience to make better choices in the future. And so hopefully that will give better context to making living amends. And we have talked about this on the podcast before, but just in case, I thought I would choose this reading. I'm going to try to keep the production to a minimum, and I'll probably talk about it a little bit more in detail after our conversation, but I will be reading some emails and some comments on Spotify and YouTube. Over the past few weeks, it's been getting harder and harder to sit at my computer and record and edit. So for this week, I won't be having any new music to share. Though I did get a few things that I did want to talk about, but I'll save those for future episodes. But I will have the chance to read some listener feedback. And just a heads up, we will be talking about minor attraction and childhood sexual trauma, as well as suicide. So things get a little bit heavy at certain points, but like you heard at the beginning of this episode, we did have a lot of fun, and I loved Jay's river analogy. So now, without further ado, here is our conversation that we had in July. I hope you enjoy it. All right, well, I will get us started. I am so honored to finally have Jay here on the podcast, and Jay emailed us a long time ago, and we've been having an email conversation for the past couple of months trying to figure out when we're going to do this, and we're finally able to record here in July. So welcome, Jay.
Pleasure. Glad to finally be here.
Yeah. So I think I got an email from you last year
Mhm.
By the time I was starting to schedule recordings, that was right around the time of our annual Bay Area retreat. And
Mhm.
that is a really, really busy month for me. And then it's like right after that, I'm just like, okay, I'm finally ready, and I just kept getting sidetracked. And
Yeah.
luckily, I've had quite a few recordings in the books that I can keep episodes moving along. But
Mhm.
I've been wanting to have you on for quite some time. And before I turn it over to you, over the past like month, I keep like remembering like the day before. I usually set aside Tuesdays or Wednesdays to record, and
Sure.
we had agreed on Wednesdays would be a really good day. And so it's like Tuesday it comes up and I'm at work. It's like, oh shit, I didn't send out the email again. And so, yeah, thank you for the prompt this week. And I was able to get the link out to you and have you here on the podcast.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
Awesome.
You know.
So, yeah, I usually start off with inner, middle, and outer circle activities. Are you comfortable sharing
Yeah.
those?
Yeah. So my inner circle is, of course, as the circles go, everything I want to avoid and be abstinent and sober from. So that's going to be any and all pornography, R-rated movies that have sexual scenes in them, especially where any frontal nudity is present, right? Also, any erotic literature, stories, and then also newly added within the last couple months has been fantasy thinking and thoughts.
Oh, okay.
And of really kind of any length at all of any kind of entertaining of that. So this, and of course, my middle circle then is really kind of anything that's going to lead into that.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't have it super defined at the moment, but really it's anything that's going to trigger my desire to head to the inner circle. And I mean, it could be, something as simple as, we talk about R-rated movies, but I mean, there's even PG-13 movies that can get a little triggering at times, right?
Oh, yeah.
So I try to avoid those. I so want to avoid a lot of things that are in my inner circle that happened in my past. I so want to avoid those where I really don't have really much anything in the middle circle. It's like I set up this giant no man's land, this giant DMZ where, I want to make it so hard, right, for me to have a giant break in my sobriety and a giant relapse and a big acting out moment. I want to avoid that so much that what some people might be like, wow, you're really putting that in your inner circle. That's kind of okay to be in a middle circle. That's okay. Like, no, I want to actively avoid it that much. And so, yeah, I always imagine my middle circle as this, 100 miles of nothing, empty, barbed wire, walls,
Yeah.
But then the outer circle is the sunshine, roses, birds chirping, right?
Yeah.
I'm married, so it's anything and everything with my wife, but it's also going off-roading in my 4x4.
Cool.
It's fishing, doing stuff outdoors, playing video games. I do computer work for a living. And that's one of the big things that I've come to realize about the circles when it comes to the outer circle. It's not just, okay, what does healthy sexuality look like, or what are healthy sexual activities? It's also what's just great to do with your time.
Mm-hmm.
And it brings positivity from you and makes other people's lives positive who are around you. So I often, I kind of joke to my wife. I'm like, so you want to go do some outer circle activities? Let's head to the trails this weekend, right?
Yeah. Yeah. When you mentioned off-roading, I've owned probably 6 to 8 Jeeps over the years. Mm-hmm. Starting off with the old-fashioned CJs, and then Cherokees and Grand Cherokees, and even had a Liberty. But yeah, I used to love off-roading. Quite a few times, I actually blew up my first Jeep. Delinquency in high school. We at lunchtime, or I think it was during school hours, we went, there's some trails near my house, and I remember seeing a trail that I hadn't found before, and found that it actually dead ended into a ditch. And So I hit the brakes and the whole thing like slid over the edge and the catalytic converter sparked and lit the hill on fire. So yeah, that was the end of my first Jeep there. But yeah, I used to love, like, I live near the Santa Cruz Mountains, and my mom lived up in the Sierras. And so I would purposely try to find roads that went out as far as you can go until it ended into like a fire road or something, and see where we can get lost and just have a blast out there on the trails.
Yeah, I haven't had owned a 4x4 for that long, and so it's a new experience for me to be driving down the road and I see a 2-track heading off into nowhere in the woods, and I'm like, oh, I wonder what's down there. Do I have time to go explore? No, you need to go run this errand really quick. But
yeah, that's so cool as an outer circle activity. I haven't thought about that stuff in years.
Yeah, one of the hard things as a sex addict is, yes, the struggle's always going to be there, right? There's always going to be that little piece that just wants to ruin everything for a little brief moment of pleasure.
Yeah.
And it can be tiring. It can be depressing. Like, so many negative emotions can stem from this, reality. And so for me, that's where it's really important to, rather than, dwell on this, like I'm standing on an isolated pillar surrounded by everything bad and evil I'm trying to fight off. Let's bring as much maximum enjoyment in our life as possible. And so, yeah, we're being sober while at the same time having fun. Yeah. And it's smiling, and then so that's as much focus as goes into the inner circle of things I want to avoid. There's also a lot of focus on the outer circle of things we really want to do and have pleasure doing.
Yeah. Kind of replace that void. Yeah. So thinking about the acting out and stuff, I was wondering if we can kind of get like a mini first step and kind of where you came from and how you grew up and what led you into the rooms of SAA.
Yeah. So I like to say for me, it started when I was 8. I was over at my uncle's house, being babysat, and it was late at night, and he turned on the Playboy channel that he had, and it was kind of one of those, hey, look at this, turn you into a man kind of things, right? There was at least nothing happened. I can't speak to what his intentions were, right? But nothing happened between us. But, for me, it was more of a, time to become a man. Instead of let's go hunt your first deer or whatever, it's let's look at your first naked woman. And of course, I'm 8, and I don't really know at that time what I'm looking at, other than I really like what I'm looking at. So, and after that, nothing really took off. It just kind of was on the back burner for the next several years. And then when I was 11, that was the first, sex ed class in school. And that's when I learned, oh, that's what I looked at when I was okay. Now that I know what this is, let's combine that with this newfangled dial-up internet computer that we got. And let's go see what's out there. And I managed to find Sports Illustrated swimsuit screensaver and download that on the family computer. That evening, my dad found it and talked to me and said, don't do that ever again. And that was the last time my dad ever talked to me about pornography.
Oh, geez. Yeah.
So I learned my lesson that I need to be better at hiding what I'm doing. So right after that, it didn't immediately get worse, right? It just kind of was there as a thing I did once in a while. Wasn't really a compulsive behavior or activity. But the following year in middle school is when I was bullied a lot. The bullying for me became a huge issue all throughout middle school, to the point where I would come home and I'd be crying and my dad would be like, oh, what's wrong? Nothing, I'm fine, Yet in that bullying, there was still that desire to be loved, the desire for physical contact. I see my classmates holding hands in their little puppy love relationships that they're having, and I want that too. But instead of getting that, I'm getting bullied. And so that's when pornography on the internet started to really become a thing, where it became this Happy Gilmore happy place for me. You know, it really became our brains are remarkably good at protecting us and having these kind of safe modes that they can go into. Now, they might not be the most healthy things, but our brains will figure out something. And that's how I coped with the bullying, was pornography. And then high school, the bullying stopped, but that's when the isolation kicked in. Because I realized in that transition from middle school to high school, if I stay away from my classmates and avoid them and avoid people my age in general, I can't get bullied. And so that kind of self-isolation, it stopped the bullying dead cold in its tracks. But when you self-isolate, of course, you're not finding that girlfriend or getting that companionship, right? That you're looking for, the desire to be desired, right? And so, again, turning to pornography, it got worse. Internet speeds got faster. The dial-up sound where the machine sounds like it's going to explode turns into the silence of cable internet. I got into doing panty raids on clotheslines in the neighborhood, camping, look at what's hanging on clotheslines and campsites, and then one night my mom found some women's underwear in my bedroom. And she made me throw it away. Of course, it's a really shameful thing, right? But then that was the last time my mom ever talked to me about pornography or any sexual issue thing, right? Kind of like a ignorance is bliss. It's a fad. It's a phase. He'll get over it. He'll grow out of it, and he'll be normal. Of course, around that time, I got my own computer in my bedroom. And I'll say this right now, having a computer in a bedroom is not a good thing when you're a sex addict. And then also around that time is when the Napster and all that music sharing started, right? Late 90s, early 2000s. And so around that time, of course, too, is when that program LimeWire was released.
I know that one.
That was the first file sharing program, peer-to-peer file sharing, where you could share not just music but also images and videos. And of course, videos and images, that's pornography, right? And it was in all of that, downloading everything, where I came across my first child pornography video. And there was just something about that video that just lit up my brain. Like, we just went from that lame caffeine drug to heroin or something, right? That huge thing. And that immediately became my drug of choice, if you will. Of course, I knew at the time, like, wow, this is, that taboo illicit nature. It's also illegal, right? So it adds to that heightened sense of, right? But I mean, you download that first file, the black helicopters don't show up. And so you do the second file, the black helicopters don't show up. So this is against the law, but at the same time, you really like it. It's doing something for your brain, and you're not doing anything to anybody. You're just looking at an image on a computer. So it's easy to justify that it's okay, even though there's a part of you that knows this isn't okay. One voice louder than the other, of course. And so that continued into my college time. And it was during my college time I actually met a girl, and I was in the midst of college, and she had just started college. She was living in a adult living home, a group home, for extreme suicidal tendencies, and was a victim herself of child sex abuse. And that's what drove her and brought her into the situation she was at and trying to deal with mentally. And so we would go out on a date, and I would have to sign her out from a group home like I'm picking up a package at the UPS store. The home by 9 or the police come looking for her kind of thing, right? I mean, talk about your curfew of curfews. But I was absolutely head over heels in love. Of course, it's the damsel in distress So it's fulfilling my white knight in shining armor fantasies that I always had as a kid, right? And I'm like, this is my moment. I have arrived. This is my purpose in life. But yet, even though I knew her story, and even though I was not wanting to hurt her at all, I would take a bullet for her in a heartbeat. I still had this Jekyll and Hyde thing going on.
Yeah.
And I still had this double life that I was living at home. Yeah, there were moments where I'm like making that connection of, wow, what am I doing? Delete everything. A couple days would go by and okay, let's go download. What did we delete? What was that? Okay, download that, that typical binge purge addiction thing, right?
Yeah.
And so this continued for a little over a year. The relationship was going good in my judgment. Yet I still had that double life. And then one summer, I got a phone call. I was at work from a state police detective, and he wanted me to come home and he had some questions. And I knew immediately what this was all about.
Yeah.
And I do not remember driving home. I have no memory of the drive. I just remember getting a phone call, and then I'm in the driveway. I lived with my parents at the time still. Now I'm in my early 20s. Yeah, I had state police. I had the FBI. I had lab technicians. I had police officers of various jurisdictions. And they were taking everything that ran on electricity that I possessed. And they were taking it all. Of course, my folks were home. And so they pulled me into their vehicle to just, get the police interview right there in the driveway. And of course, I'm thinking like, okay, how do I get out of this, right? Can I say it was hackers or a virus or something? And so I try to do that, but I get shut down right away. He's like, nope, come on, none of that BS. We know.
We've been through this enough.
a judge approved the warrant. We got you dead to rights. Okay, yes, I know you do. So I confess to everything there. And shockingly, they don't arrest me like handcuffs or nothing. They just take my confession, they take all my stuff, and they leave. And I'm still there sitting in the driveway. So, of course, the next step is to let mom and dad know why the police just took everything out of my bedroom. Not a fun conversation to have. Somehow, they did not decide to kick me out of the house. And then the final discussion I had to have that day was with the girlfriend, the CSA victim girlfriend, and tell her why the police were there and what I was looking at. And the look on her face when I told her, that will be something that I'll just never forget. Like, I saw heartbreak. I actually saw heartbreak. That'll stick with me forever. I'll forget my name at the end of the days before I forget that moment. So yeah, of course, she leaves me immediately. And from there on, I'm waiting to find out what's going to happen to me legally. Still not arrested, handcuffed, or anything. My parents go out and get a lawyer. And long story short, because the charge was possession of child sex abuse material, I could have been sentenced to 11 years in prison, but I got 5 years probation, no jail time up front. In this whole ordeal, I was never once handcuffed. I was never incarcerated for even an hour.
Wow.
And my story did not make the news. This is just not typically how these cases resolve themselves, right? And so I am a very blessed person in that regard. That, yes, the police showed up. Yes, they took my computer. Yes, I spent the next 15 years on the sex offender list and got off recently a couple years ago.
Wow.
And I have an unexpungible criminal record the rest of my life, right? But yet in all that, it's been 18 years since that day, and it's been 18 years since I've looked at pornography.
Wow.
And I'll say it's very easy to start a pornography sobriety when the police take your computer.
Yeah. I would imagine so.
So if you're struggling with pornography, the easiest thing to do is to throw it in the garbage. You'll have immediate success, I guarantee it. And so that whole thing, and I'm standing there waiting to be sentenced in the courtroom, and I'm thinking to myself, how did this happen? How did it get this bad? Where did it all go wrong? And so ever since that moment, has really been my journey of trying to answer this question and trying to understand. Because, I downloaded what I downloaded. I looked at what I looked at. I enjoyed what I enjoyed. But at the same time, that's not how I wanted it to go down. Mm-hmm. I wanted a normal, healthy relationship with a woman. Like, I had what I wanted for a little over a year. But yet the rest of me didn't latch on to like, hey, okay, you don't need this little survival mechanism called pornography. You don't need that anymore. You're done. You're done with sex addiction. You don't need it. You can be quote unquote normal or whatever the phrase is.
Yeah.
And so it just never caught on until it was too late. But I'll tell you what, when the FBI is at your doorstep, you do realize that your addiction has become unmanageable.
Yeah.
So that's really how it all came to be and where things started and where things landed. And the progressive nature of this is very real. And I'll forever believe that even though I never, had any physical contact, if it hadn't been for that law enforcement intervention, it probably would have headed down that path.
Yeah.
That progressive nature of wanting something more powerful, wanting a better experience, something that makes you feel even better. It started with the Sports Illustrated swimsuit screensaver, and it ended up with police, right? Mm-mm. I wish it went down any number of different ways, right? And I can look back and I can see my dad catching me with the screensaver, my mom catching me with the underwear, a few other times that cropped up, right? Where there were signs that other people saw, but for one reason or another, it never triggered a very serious intervention. It was just, okay, well, don't do that. Anyway, what do you want for dinner or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. And that's what I've kind of come to realize is that it's like this river. And at first, it's a small river and it's peaceful, it's quiet, and you're going down in a canoe or boat or whatever. And it's nice. The scenery is beautiful, by the way. Things look fantastic. And you keep going down the river and the river gets bigger, maybe a little bit more wild. There's other people in the river too. And those men are all, this is a really nice view. I like this river. But yet there's a couple of people on the shore that are like, hey, get out the river. There's a deadly waterfall ahead. Mm-hmm. Get out now. And you're like, what? What was that? And you're enjoying the view and you keep going and you get closer to the water's edge. There's signs that say, get out now. It's deadly. And then you don't realize you've gone over the waterfall's edge until you're halfway down. And there is nothing to do except here comes that impact, right?
Yep.
And so I've been over the edge, and I'm telling you, if there's a way for people to get out of that river, right? Get out. It's just not worth it. Mm-hmm. But I've been in SAA a little over a year officially.
Okay.
But before that, 17 years without. I joined SAA and I'm looking at the 12 steps and I'm like, wow, I've already kind of done that, and that. Wow, I'm really good for a first timer, But before this, I had done through my church a program called the Conquer Series.
Okay.
It's definitely very much Christian religion-based sex addiction recovery system course or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And it's Conquer Series because it's led by a guy who's a former Vietnam Marine pilot. And so it's heavy military theme kind of thing. But at the same time, in the midst of all of that material in that program, there was also some secular brain science added in. And that is kind of when I first realized, our brains have these things called reward systems that like to be rewarded.
Yeah, the dopamine.
And that will seek out the biggest reward they can get for the least amount of effort input. And so that was the first time those questions that I was asking all those years ago finally started to get some answers to put together, right? And ever since joining SAA, my eyes have been opened even more, especially as other people in the group share their first steps and just into people's thoughts of daily readings and how's your week been? there's a lot of good information that I learned from these guys. And, I never considered that. That's an interesting way to think about that. And so I'm taking down some anonymous notes on a piece of paper, for me to kind of go use throughout my meditation for the rest of the week. I will never go back and do what I did because I know the pain that it can cause.
Yeah.
I've caused the pain once, and I don't want to cause that pain again. Yeah, to kind of add to the story, every time I share the story at a newcomer meeting, I always share a different version of it because I always forget or add or something.
Yeah.
I always like to tell the newcomer, my gift to you is a unique version of my story. But sometime after all of this went down, that girl that I was dating took her life.
Oh, geez.
And of course, for a very long time, I completely, it was absolutely my fault. It was just delayed. It wasn't an immediate thing, but it happened a while later. It took 5 years of therapy to undo that thought, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that really had a huge impact on me in terms of acknowledging, I don't know what the reason was, right? I think to the stepdad that abused her, and I don't know what the outcome was of that legally for him, if he faced anything. But I just think back to okay, what was his start? What happened to him when he was 8? And not as a way to excuse the behavior, right?
But to understand where it came from.
As a way to understand, how did it start? Because we know how it ended. It ended in the creation of a victim who would later go on to take their life. And so what if there had been some way for that person to get out of the river before he went over the waterfall? This girl would still be alive, possibly, right? There would be one less victim in the world. And isn't that a great thing? So that whole story of mine is really just this catalyst of how can we get people out of the river? And it doesn't have to be suffering legal consequences or creating new victims, even though those are kind of the really extreme instances of what sex addiction can lead to. But there's also wives finding out and marriages breaking up, families breaking up, and there's shame and pain that leads to suicide. There's just all sorts of just unpleasant consequences in a sex addiction that's not managed. You're not even trying to get help and work on it, that it's running wild, burning everything in its path. I wish I had every answer, and I could say, if you're doing this, here's my 5-step secret formula recipe for immediate lasting success. I think if I had that answer, I'd be really rich. But I can definitely say that there has to be room for people to admit that their problem is unmanageable.
Yeah.
And when I was at the height, everything that I had going on, my parents might have had an inkling. But if they really knew the depths of it, if they really knew what was going on, I know they would have gotten help. I had great parents. They just didn't really know.
Yeah.
Because I kept it a secret. Yet, did I feel like I should come out and tell them? Well, what are consequences going to be for telling them? Is something bad going to happen? And so that fear of what happens when I'm found out, what happens when everything comes to a head, what happens when the light is shown on everything, and that fear of what potential consequences or bad things might happen, we go, well, I'm not telling you today. Maybe I'll tell you tomorrow. Maybe I'll tell you next week. Meanwhile, everything that you're doing is festering, potentially getting worse. And so there just needs to be this more open atmosphere for men to come out and raise their hand. I've got a problem.
Yeah. Several things I really connected with in your story. Yeah. As a voyeur, I used to videotape people changing, and my mom had found that videotape, put a note on it and said, "This is not good." But I did have the police show up at my door, had Miranda rights read to me, but there was no actual legal consequence that happened. But having to face my parents and talk to them about what I did, it was harmful, but it still wasn't enough to spark that conversation in terms of, we think you've got a problem, here's a path out. I too had the the brief talks about sexuality. We were lucky that, it wasn't a shameful thing in our family, but, I didn't get more than kind of textbook information on what sexuality was. So just looking at with my kid, when I noticed some signs, image searches or
Mm-hmm.
YouTube searches and things like that, it's like, okay, it is time to have a discussion. And we got a book and we went cover to cover, had a great time just opening up about questions and things like that. And that was something that, I never got from my parents. And several years afterwards, my son came up to me and said, I'm really grateful that I didn't go down that path. And, I still check, from time to time, and everything seems like it's going really well.
Mm-hmm.
The LimeWire thing. Yeah, I definitely did that and found the same sort of material, and that's what my wife found. And so that was the intervention for me to get help in 12-step recovery. And
Yeah.
it was that thing. So I never had any legal consequences, even though the material that I was looking at definitely warranted it. That look of hurt, pain, disgust, shame. I remember seeing that in her, and disappointment. And, I've had relapses and had to see that look again.
So, yeah, I mean, you talk about relapses, right? So I haven't looked at pornography since the police came.
Wow.
But our brains are unfortunately very good at remembering things we've looked at.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And that is why fantasies are big on my inner circle. And for a long time, they were a middle circle activity for me. Well, of course, it's hard to control what you think in the blessed moment of any particular moment of a day. You think of something for 2 or 3 seconds and then it disappears.
Mm-hmm.
Well, okay, that's not really that big of a deal. You're not focusing on it or whatever, entertaining it. But I'm very good at gaming a system. So if I set up a system where, as long as I don't think about it for more than 3 or 5 seconds, then it doesn't count. I'm going to go the rest of my day with a bunch of 3-5 second moments with maybe a 1 second pause in between, so it doesn't count. And then we'll do another 3 or 5 seconds. So I just recognize for me that it's like, no, it needs to be a hard nothing whatsoever.
Yeah.
And so, we talk about length of sobriety. So I have to kind of like, the pornography for 18 years. However, the fantasy thinking, still very much a work in progress.
Yeah.
Because one of the things for me too was, okay, well, why did child pornography become a big thing for me? What drove that? Am I wired like that? Was I doomed from birth genetically? Some switch in the brain? Well, come to find out, the answer is both. It's 2 rails of a train track. You've got genetic predisposition to certain addictions, and then you've got the environment that you grow up in and have in your life. And it's that combination of the two that really sets it off. And so for me, I recognize the age of everybody in the videos, middle school, high school, early college.
Mm-hmm.
When was I absolutely, completely alone and isolated and in total pain? Middle school, high school, and early college. So I was trying to fulfill a desire in one way or another that wasn't able to be fulfilled in what would be a normal process.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, the fantasy thinking is really just how I combat that. It's just this recognition of, okay, I'm having this fantasy thought. Why am I having this fantasy thought? Oh, it's because I'm feeling lonely and isolated. Why am I feeling lonely and isolated? I'm married right now. Interesting fact. I was married 2 years to the day that the police showed up.
Oh, wow.
My wedding anniversary is also the police anniversary. We met a couple months after all the legal dust settled, and I was just kind of starting my probation and my time on the list. And our first date, I told her, I said, hey, here's what's up. Here's what happened. And I fully expected, well, that's it. I'm done with you. And I thought I was going to be alone forever because no one was ever going to want to date me because of this thing I have. And she said, well, when's date number 2? And I'm thinking, well, that's not how this is supposed to go. I'm not prepared for a date number 2. I didn't know I was going to have to think that far in advance, right? And yeah, we just celebrated being married for 16 years.
Nice.
So I have this loving woman who is just head over heels in love with me somehow. Don't ask me for the secret sauce on that one. I have no idea. Yet I can still feel this loneliness and this isolation. Why? What is that? And I recognize that it is not me in the present time having that. It is the past me with the trauma and the memories. Not simply remembering what happened, but reliving what happened. And it allows that loneliness and isolation feelings to crop up and be just as strong now as they were back then. And then, of course, the fantasies come in like, oh, we'll take care of you. And then that's when my mental exercises kick in. No, you're not going to take care of me. Because remember what happened last time? Remember how bad it got? Remember what actually happened? Do you really want to go down that road again? Do you really want to hurt your wife? Because you know what had happened when you hurt your girlfriend. You saw what happened. But it is absolutely a battle I'm never going to give up on, right? This is just something for me that's not worth ceding ground on. And so, yeah, I will forever endeavor to see how many things I can put in my inner circle and how many things I can have in my outer circle.
Nice. One thing that when you mentioned the Conquer series and doing that through the church, I know a lot of people have gone through the church with things like Celebrate Recovery. But yeah, I remember talking, I've opened up to all my friends about my sex addiction and high school friends and being able to talk openly about it. And remember talking to a few that were part of their church and have done a lot of work in their relationship and stuff. And, when I'm describing these sort of steps and, oh yeah, we do something similar in our church and these steps. Oh yeah, we've got that in our church. And so I was going to ask about, when you came to SAA several years, after the shocking fact, but you've already done like this Conquer series. How did that relate to the steps and kind of what steps have you done? Where are you working on right now?
Yeah. So interesting that you talk about church and being plugged in and church activity, right? So at the height of my addiction, right when the police showed up and it all fell apart in a matter of hours, at that moment in my life, I was as plugged in and connected to my church as I possibly could be. I was doing praise team. I was doing Sunday school, Bible studies, helping out, volunteering, this and that, dedicating time and effort. And so I'm thinking, well, shoot, I got to be good. I'm doing all this church stuff. Yeah, I've got this thing I'm struggling with. But it's got to be all right. I'm doing all this church stuff. I got this girl. I'm the knight in shining armor, rescuing from the tower, damsel in distress. I'm checking boxes, man. I am awesome. But yet in all that church activity, and yeah, we had quote unquote accountability groups, nothing super structured, but just the, typical men's accountability group. Out of 300 men, we'll find 4 guys who want to get together for coffee and admit they have a problem. Yet none of that got me to stop. It took an active law enforcement intervention to get me to stop. Now, am I grateful for law enforcement intervention? I'm not thrilled. I have this criminal record. Not thrilled I was on a list. Not thrilled that I could have been incarcerated for 11 years, as what does happen to a lot of men who go down that path. Yet, at the same time, I am absolutely thrilled that I'm not in it anymore. So yeah, it's a really weird thing. But I learned that this religious activity I was doing, it was just this thing I did. It was still an extension of my parents' religion and faith. In the moment that the police came was really the moment where it started to finally become my faith. And there was this, not a literal come to Jesus, but, there was okay, God, I was doing all these things, but yet it all went terribly wrong. I've hurt people. I've gone from hero to a villain in this girl's life, and in her mother's eyes, same transition, not thrilled about that outcome. What happened? And it was this, I never really had a deep faith relationship connection to God as I understood him. I was doing these things, these activities, kind of whitewashing everything that happened that night in front of the computer screen. So yeah, it was interesting coming into SAA and looking at the steps. And like, well, maybe we have a problem. Yeah, well, we did that a long time ago. Yep, did that. Fearless moral inventory. What have I done? You know, and so I never say that I've done like check a step off. The only step that I've ever really truly checked off, in my opinion, is step 1. I've got a problem.
Yeah.
But the other steps for me, it's kind of this revolving 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 on through 12. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 on through 12. And I keep going back to them, lest I not allow myself to do a moral inventory and something starts to fester that wasn't festering before and I don't catch it. For me, the hardest step for me, so step 8 is being willing to make amends.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a hard step for me to go, yeah, I definitely want to make amends to that girl that I was dating and I hurt when I had to tell her what was going on. But she's not around anymore. So it's a little hard to do step 9 when the person that you so desperately want to say you're sorry and express and make sure they're aware of how sorry you are is no longer around. How do you then tackle that? What does that step 9 start to look like? And, you know, through the group, learning about this concept of living amends and how you can make amends without even interacting with the person. Because, of course, the step is also when it's, you know, safe to do so for you and the other person. It's not going to cause anybody pain or harm. And so even if she was around, I don't know if I would do it because it might cause harm and pain and bring up a lot of bad things for her. So I may not do it. But this living amends where you go, okay, well, how can we honor the memory of somebody who's no longer with us, who you hurt and wish you hadn't hurt? And, well, obviously, married to a beautiful woman right now, let's not hurt her. So what can I do to ensure no acting out, especially with pornography, right? And so right now I'm talking to you on my computer, but that's set up in the living room. And there's a Ring security camera that looks at like on my computer area and on my screen. And my wife can dial into that thing on her phone anytime she chooses. And she might be at work and I do remote work at home and she'll, you know, talk to me through the security camera. Hey, hon, how's it going? What do you want for dinner? You know, but I know what it's like to have electronic devices in private places. And again, talking about that middle DMZ battlefield that we just want to create this huge separation between us and that inner circle. Having a computer in the living room instead of a bedroom or a private office is a step. Is it inconvenient at times? Absolutely.
Yeah. Mine is the same.
Will I ever give up that inconvenience for more privacy? Never. I've given up my right to privacy. I no longer have it. My wife wants to see my phone. Here you go, hon. Here's my phone. And I'll tell you what, it is so freeing.
Yeah.
To not be looking at pornography on my phone, to not be texting a woman or whatever. I can hand my wife my phone and I have zero stress. You know, I just don't care. And I don't care that I don't have privacy because that's one of the things that helps to keep me sober is knowing that at any moment she can see anything I'm doing. Perfect. That just means I'm never going to do anything because I don't want her to see it. And yeah, as a geek, nerd, could I figure out a way? But we know what happens.
Yeah,
we know what happens. And you see stories all the time of like this and that sting, undercover cop, caught deep dark web, whatever. There's nothing I could do to get back into it, as it were, where I would not get caught again. I mean, it would just be a matter of time. And so, yeah, I enjoy my wonderful life I'm living now by not getting down that road in the first place. And I don't have to worry about it. I pass a cop on the street driving. I'm not worried he's pulling me over to put handcuffs on me. I hear a knock on my door. I'm not worried it's the police, though I will say that it took a while for that feeling to go away. I know that's the delivery guy. So it is so freeing when you find and establish sobriety in this program, there's so much freedom. One of the things I love to do on our weekly groups is read the promises. That's like, I'll read it. I'll read it. Cause, not regretting the past nor wish to shut the door on it. I grew up in a household that was very much a shame-based discipline. Don't forget the bad thing that you did. You will always remember that bad thing you did, so you never do it again. That was a bad thing. Bad, bad, bad. In order to not do it again. Okay. Negative reinforcement. Well, many years later, you try to move on from a bad thing you did, and your brain won't let you because you're trained to be your own parent. Remember that one thing you did that one time? Remember the look on that girl's face when you had to tell her, you're a terrible person. Just bad, terrible. I'll never do it again. That's great, but that was a bad thing, And so, yeah, it's taken a lot of therapy to undo that programming. And,
I have a lot of that, like negative self-talk. Yeah.
And of course, there's commenters on the internet. Oh, well, you looked at what you looked and you deserve all the bad things and the this and the that and the blah, blah, blah. But when you do something bad, you get caught. You change. Once you've changed, it's time to move on.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of time for other people to move on too, who, have inner knowledge of what happened. It's time for them to move on too. Because you get stuck on it, even though you've changed and you've got recovery. But if you're stuck, it just opens up a lot of bad things, and you can find yourself relapsing before you know it. And now that you've relapsed and you've given up some sobriety, especially if you've got a long sobriety, now it's, now I got to go day 1, day 2, all over again.
Mm-hmm.
This is maybe where I'm a little bit of an SAA heretic. I don't put a lot of attention to my sobriety time, whether it's 18 years of pornography or, hey, I got a week of absolutely no fantasy thoughts whatsoever. This is, because if I were to have a full blown relapse, and I mean back to cops and a judge again, if I was to go back that bad, a judge is going to give me not one bit of credit. I've got a 15-year, 18-year chip from SAA. I'm cashing this in for my get out of jail free card. That's not going to happen, right? So I very much embrace the for today, one day at a time.
Exactly.
It's a great day to be sober, and I'm looking forward to being sober tomorrow. And that's how I take this whole program.
Yeah. I think I've talked about it on the podcast before. My first sponsor was very much into counting days, and my next sponsor was, don't worry about the days. Just focus on the day. It's kind of what I do.
Yeah, I carry a pewter token coin in my pocket. Got it off an Etsy shop.
Oh, cool.
And it is a carved little forest scene with a rescue helicopter lifting me up, rescuing me. And it's got the dates that the police showed up on there. And I carry that around instead of a 1-year chip or 30-day chip or whatever. I carry this token, this remembrance. Think about how far you've come since that day. And also think about how bad that day was. And so it serves as this reminder of, we've come a long way. We are a lot better off. Life is great compared to where it was in the depths of our addiction. But also, if we were to go back, we know how bad it can become, and we know how bad that relapse day is going to be.
Yeah.
And so to have gone through all of the legal things that I went through, and, really it wasn't so much the police as it was just the look on that girl's face.
Yeah.
That was something that you don't want to do, but you're doing it. That car wreck in slow motion thing, right? And just, oh man, I'm breaking her heart, but that's the last thing I want to do. But it's also happening right now, this very moment. But it's also something I don't want to, and just man, I never want to go back to that ever. And so it serves as a good catalyst for sobriety. I'll just say that there's no way any of us should be okay with having this double life going on. And I know few people really are actually okay with it. But I just think back to right before the police came, and their investigation had been going on for a few months before they actually knocked on the door. Because, of course, they got to gather their stuff so they can go to a judge and et cetera, et cetera. But I think like, man, what if I had been able to come out to my folks and say, hey, here's what I've been doing. I don't know how to stop, but I really want to. My dad probably would have smashed the computer and thrown it away. Great. Better that than the police taking it as evidence. Fantastic. Mm-hmm. And I probably would have gotten psychological help. I went and got psychological help. My parents made me do it after the police came. Would have been nice to have gotten that before the police came, right? Mm-hmm. And I think to all the men out there who at this moment, they have a double life of some sort going on, one flavor or another. And like, man, coming out and coming clean now, yeah, it's probably going to suck, but it's probably only going to get worse. And you may not be able to set the terms of when the light gets shown on what's going on. You may not be able to set those terms. And then it's really going to suck. And that's what I find cool about my group, right? Mm-hmm. Everybody shares their stories, and there's a common thread of it started when I was young. It got worse. Then this bad thing happened, and that was my step one. And there's some people in the group are, well, I haven't had a bad thing happen. I just realized I needed to get help. And here I am.
Yeah.
And like, man, so awesome to see those people. Like they didn't need that bad catalyst to get them to the room. You know, they just woke up and were like, man, this is not going to end well, or this is going to go on forever and I don't want it to. And just show up for that first meeting and then just keep coming. Mm-hmm. And the program will eventually take hold, and then the program will start to work. But every time somebody shares like, the calamity happened, my heart goes out because, yeah, I had calamity happen. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I really hope that people who are listening to this figure out a way to get help and come clean, come to that realization that your addiction is unmanageable. Come to that realization, look up a group and make that first connection. You don't have to be a superhero and even spill everything in that first mm-hmm. meeting. You can just go and just sit and listen, and then eventually feel comfortable to share. If you're a wife listening, and I'm not saying start suspecting your husband of anything, right? Mm-hmm. But if your husband opens up to you and says, hey, honey, I'm really sorry, but here's what's been going on, give him room to pursue the change that he wants to pursue. We all have our own different reactions to things, but if you can just acknowledge, oh, my husband has hurt me bad, but yet he wants to pursue this change. Even if you think it's a bunch of hogwash baloney and he's just trying to save, blah, blah, whatever, and you have a negative view on the whole program, just hang in there and wait and see what the program will do for your husband. Because, gosh, I can easily see so many relationships where a husband's in it, but he doesn't feel like he's got room in the relationship to come out and come clean.
Yeah.
And, how many times did I want to stop on my own? How many times did I try to stop on my own? How many times did I delete everything I was downloading? And how many times did I go re-download it? So yeah, the amount of solo willpower of I'll gut it out and I can do it without anybody finding out, and I'll get through this and no one will know, and I'll take the secret to my grave. Man, if you're capable of doing that, more power to you. But I'm going to tell you, I haven't heard that kind of story yet.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was going to say, I really loved your analogy of the being on the river and all the warnings right before you hit that waterfall. And, if we're able to get people to the rooms of SAA, get them into recovery before they hit that worst thing. Yeah, that is, so awesome. But, we're also there on the other side of the waterfall as well to help people out.
Yeah. To go, hey, I know what's going to happen when you go over. I've gone over. I know what it's like. It's not pretty.
Yeah.
Grab this rope, come ashore. Let's talk.
Oh, all right. I am so grateful that over the months of emailing back and forth that we finally got the chance to do this, Jay.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's been a pleasure, Jason.
Thanks so much.
Take care.
Bye.
Yeah, bye.
Many, many thanks to Jay for sharing his story here on the podcast and reaching out to us via email. After so many months of emailing back and forth, I'm so glad that we finally had the chance to record. Recently, I've been responding to a lot of emails, as many as I can, and I do have some new recordings scheduled before I go out for my hip surgery at the end of September. So speaking of my hip surgery, I have had a hard time sitting in my computer desk chair to do recording and editing for the podcast, and so it's taken me a little bit longer these days to put out episodes. And for the rest of this episode, I'd like to focus on some comments on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, and a few listener emails. But before getting to that, I did want to talk about emails in particular. So I have 4 basic emails: my work email, my home email, and the 2 for the podcast. And my inboxes on those, for the most part, I leave everything in the inbox and search for it when I need to find something. But lately, it's been really hard to figure out which emails I've read on the podcast, which I still need to respond to. And so I've been going through each of my emails and striving for 0 inbox. I managed to do that at work, close to doing it on my regular email. Got about maybe 40 more messages to go through there. The feedback email, I think I'm down to 6, but the Jason at sexaddictsrecoverypod.com, I've got quite a few hundred to go through. And so I've been working on that this week to try to unclutter whatever I can. It's been helpful to figure out which emails I still need to respond to, and I've responded to a few this week, as well as ones that I wanted to read here on the podcast. So for the rest of this episode, I did want to talk about some of the comments that we've gotten over the past few months. Starting off with Apple, this one I may or may not have read on the podcast. This came in May. And we haven't had very many new ratings and reviews on Apple, so if you are so inclined, it really helps out the visibility of the podcast when people are doing searches. And this one says, like attending a meeting. This podcast is a regular part of my life in recovery from sex addiction. It feels like attending a meeting and having some after-meeting talk as well. Thanks to Jason and the Bay Area Intergroup for making this possible. And you're very welcome. I'm so glad that this podcast has become a program tool for so many people. From there, I wanted to move on to YouTube, and we did have a couple of comments come in recently. One of them I'm going to hold off until next week because it involves a song for the purpose of this episode, because it's taken me a while to edit through the longer conversation, wanting to keep production at a minimum so I can upload this episode. I am going to hold off on any music until next week. But we had 2 that came in. One of them I think I actually read before, but they're both related. And this is from episode 166, which was Mass sharing his first step. And just a note, I did need to make a YouTube edit for this. And so recently I've had to go through and re-edit a few episodes so they can still be visible. And just a note, I did need to make a YouTube edit for this one due to a copyright claim which blocked the video. This has been happening to a lot of YouTubers with Universal Music Group lately. And I've had to re-edit a few older episodes so they can be visible as well. One of those was episode 46, which was on workshop recordings. And that one is now back up on YouTube. Spotify also sends me notifications for copyright claims, and I have submitted proper usage under the Fair Use Copyright Law. However, I didn't submit the info for episode 46 to Spotify on time, so they removed that episode. For anyone listening on Spotify, episode 46 is still available on all other streaming services as well as the Bay Area SAA.org website. So back to the Spotify comments, and the first comment on this episode from 3 weeks ago said, "These first step stories are so helpful. Thanks for sharing." And the second one, which came in about a week and a half ago, says, "I turned off the YouTube at about the 15-minute mark. We're not supposed to share too explicitly. I think Mass did." Thank you for your comment. When doing first steps, we get a little bit more into the details. And I've had several first steps that I've attended that felt very uncomfortable. And it is getting down to the dark reality of our addictions. So this is not like a regular 3-minute share at a meeting. First steps do allow for more depth. And I do put the disclaimer at the beginning of every episode. This podcast is rated explicit on all the podcasting platforms and YouTube. It is not viewable for children. That's something that I have to mark down for every episode. So we do allow for explicit talk on the podcast. And for first steps, it can be a little triggering. So if you need to tune it out, some episodes aren't going to be for everyone. But yes, I thank you so much for your comment. And I love the constructive criticism around that. And I will be getting to that in just a moment. That wraps up YouTube. Like I mentioned, I'll read the other one next week. So for Spotify, we did get a comment on an episode that I ended up not clearing. On Spotify, it does ask me to review comments before being able to post them. And there have been a few that have been kind of negative commentary on societal views on sexuality. And in this particular case, we were talking about LGBTQ issues and non-binary issues, and someone just wrote a comment that didn't warrant being posted. It was not constructive criticism. I will okay comments that are meant to be constructive, and I'll get to one of those in just a minute. But if it's someone's gripes about sexuality, I'm not going to post it. It doesn't really warrant the response. So for the other comments, one that came in 2 weeks ago on the previous episode 167, and this was our group discussion on the motion to change Tradition 11. And it says, what? Go work with even more suffering sex addicts? Get your attention onto that, guys. Someone wants to hit on in the public for attention. Happens all the time. It's really bad for the fellowship. It's not about us. It's about who's going to come along time after us. Jesus. And my response was, I'm not quite sure what you mean by that. Perhaps more clarification is needed. Anyway, the podcast follows the SAA public relations policy according to Tradition 11, but the actual language for the tradition does not specifically mention podcasts or new media. That was the gist of the language change. So I'm not quite sure what the comment was actually about. So hopefully, hearing this response in addition to my written response, we can get some more clarification by what the listener meant by that. But thank you so much for your comment. For this one, I got a Spotify comment and an email about the same thing on episode 163, which was Judith sharing at the SAA and COSA speaker meeting. At the end of that episode, I read some of my friend Luke's writings. He's done a number of meditations over the past few years and put them into a file in chronological order. And I read his entry for May 1st, 2025. I will read both the comment and the email coming from, I believe, separate people. But this one says, if it's okay with the author, could you post the meditation you read at the end of the podcast? And the email was episode 163. Would it be possible to get a copy of the reading that you read at the end of episode 163? I think it belonged to Luke, but it had some good stuff in it. Thanks, signed D. And both in the Spotify comments and the email, I wrote that yes, indeed, that was Luke's writing, and I put together the link for the Google Doc that has all of his writings. And if anyone else is interested, you can email me and I'd be happy to send you that link. But I also copy and pasted the entire meditation for May 1st. And if you want to hear that in its entirety, check out the end of episode 163. Most of the other emails that I've been getting have been about being guests on the podcast. And one of the reasons why I brought up going through all of my email accounts is I do get a lot of stuff through the Bay Area SAA website, which comes to my regular email. And I get a lot of requests from people outside of SAA. And most of them are writing books and wanting to promote books, podcasts, websites, and things like that. I've got a written response that I have to these types of emails, basically giving the gist of This podcast being an SAA podcast, and we follow the 12 steps and 12 traditions of Sex Addicts Anonymous. And we often talk about outside help, but we don't promote those things. I wanted to read a couple of really nice responses that I got. This one says, "Hey Jason, I hope you're doing well. We thank you for accepting the possibility of having so-and-so as a guest on your show. With the launch of a second edition of our new product in mind, we believe that it would be best for us to focus on the shows where we could advertise our faith and methodology. We truly appreciate your response. Wish you all the best." And this other one came in this week and says, "Hey Jason, thanks for your response. Unfortunately, we are not a match. Wish you all the very best in your endeavors. You are doing valuable work. Best, signed A." Most of the time I don't get a response, but I tried to make the point clear that we're not here for promotion, but if they want to talk about general recovery, they're welcome to be a guest. Which brings me to this last email that I want to read here. I've deleted a few things from it just to keep further anonymity, and it says, "Hi Jason, I'm inquiring about being a guest on your podcast and would like to introduce myself. My name is N, and I've been in sexual recovery for 13 years. After I was sober in AA 25 years, my sponsor helped me see that I lacked emotional sobriety and got me into sexual recovery, which changed my entire life. To distract myself during withdrawal, I began writing 3 morning pages each day, which eventually turned into a novel. I wrote the book just to distract myself from acting out, and it worked. And now that it's done, the novel helps non-addicts understand what sex and love addiction is, inserted with an entertaining story. I stumbled a lot at first and had 100 day ones until I made some radical changes that I laid in my second book, and this one is nonfiction. These books are both written under a professional name to protect my anonymity and leave my ego out of it as much as possible. In 2020, when COVID hit, I knew I'd relapse unless I created online meetings, so I co-founded the New York City Augustine Zoom SLAA meetings. It's now grown into 5 daily meetings, serving thousands of people around the world, and runs itself with its own group conscience and rotating service members. My life each day revolves around sobriety, recovery, and service. My sexual and emotional sobriety is the foundation of my entire life. I would be very grateful for the opportunity to speak about my experience on your podcast. If you'd like to arrange a call, we could speak, and if you think I'd be a suitable guest, we can take the next step. Meantime, here are some links to my books and to the Zoom NYC Augustine meetings. Thank you for the service you do. I hope that I am to further be of service and to carry the message together with you as a guest on your show. Regards, N." And I really loved this email. I love that he's written some books, and he did name the books, and I want to clear it with my inner group before doing a recording, but I think he would be an excellent guest. It sounds like he wants to talk about recovery and not necessarily promote his books. And even if we did talk about his books, it's under a nom de plume, so it's not breaking his anonymity. I'm going to be talking to some guys in my inner group and see what they think. But yeah, I'm hoping to arrange a call with this person, and hopefully we can make something out of this. That being said, I have scheduled a few recordings for the beginning of September. Towards the end of September, I'm not sure what my availability will be for working on the podcast. I do have a first step recording, which is going to be next week, as well as 2 more recordings from the SAA and COSA speaker meeting, and the aforementioned new recordings that I've set up, and I still have a few emails that I'm waiting for responses for. So I've got a lot of episodes lined up. During the few months that I'll be off of work, it would be really nice if I could start to schedule some recordings with people in the UK. Several of those emails are from the UK, and with the 8-hour time difference, I usually have to set aside time on the weekends to record. But if I'll be off of work, I can set up time to record during the work week. But again, that will probably be more towards the middle of October before I start to do that. I'm returning to work right around Thanksgiving. So with that, my near zero inboxes. If you did want to leave feedback for the podcast, you can reach us at feedback@sexaddictsrecoverypod.com. And if you wanted to get a hold of me personally, this is the inbox that I'm still going through right now. You can reach me at jason@sexaddictsrecoverypod.com, and I'd be happy to get back to you. And with that, I'm going to close out this episode. I'm so grateful that you tuned into this one. And as always, keep coming back. The views and opinions contained in the Sex Addicts Recovery Podcast are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of the Bay Area Intergroup or the ISO of SAA.